Welcome to News with a View, hosted by me, John A. Costa, an expert on nothing, which makes me fully qualified to tell you about news. Now, today is Saturday, February 22nd already, 2026. This is episode 27. What I'm going to discuss today mainly is the Supreme Court correctly calling the president's actions with the tariff as exceeding his executive powers. As I said in many of these podcasts, excuse me, I would, and always do, look at the Constitution. And it's not that it's easy to figure out, but there are things that have been vetted over and over again in the Constitution that made this an easy call to say that. And when President Trump January 20th, said he was going to go after tariffs and he was going to invoke the executive powers on tariffs and just do it. I said back then, and I've been saying it over and over again, can't do it. Can't do it. There are things that the president can do. And just to reiterate what the IEEPA, which is the International Emergency Economics Powers Act of 1977, and there's other things going back to 1974 during the Nixon administration. But all that he allowed him to do by making that declaration. He said there's an emergency going on and this is what I'm going to do. All that allowed him to do was to say, we're no longer going to trade with these people. We are no longer going to import or export. There is nothing in there that allowed him to disregard tariffs that were already in place, enacted by Congress, and just do it. That IEEPA authorizes the president to regulate or block international commercial and financial transactions after declaring a national emergency in response to unusual or extraordinary foreign threats. And when he did this and made that, there's an emergency situation going on, and he was citing fentanyl and the border problem and immigration, he really had to go to Congress, announce it, not the way he did it, announce it to Congress and say, this is what, and he doesn't need congressional approval to declare that. He doesn't. But he did every 6 months have to report to Congress the actions that he had taken and what's going on now. It did not give the president the right to set tariffs. Now, there are situations, and the president is allowed to set tariffs under very limited and precise reasons and circumstances. While the Constitution grants Congress the power to lay taxes and tariffs, Article 1, Section 8, anyone out there who wants to look it up, they have delegated this authority to the executive branch, allowing for targeted or emergency actions. The use of these powers often requires formal investigations and, in some cases, congressional approval to extend tariffs beyond specific time limits. So if something was going on and we had a tariff with someone and it's going to expire and it would really hurt the United States to let it expire and then, it goes off the page, he can extend it. And the president can't set tariffs when Congress delegates specific authority through legislation. And I've said this before, you have to go to Congress. Typically to address a national security threats, unfair trade practices, or an emergency. Key delegated powers included in Sections 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act and Section 338 of the Trade Act of 1930, which was discriminatory practices by a country. I sell it to country X for $2, and I sell it to you for $500. Then you say that's unfair and discriminatory, or it's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. Now, with all that said, what does it really mean? And as I said in episode 26, to unravel this ball of twine now will take some time. It is my belief that certain countries could ask for relief. And when I mean relief, ask for a refund and things that they needed to pay extra for to ship their stuff out. Tariffs, when I say extra. The kickback to all this, it could be $175 billion in a worst case situation. And that's not going to happen because there have been trade agreements where both sides agreed upon. And those are theoretically legally binding. The argument could be made that it was a contract made that the president didn't have the legal authority to do so. It's the same thing to me would be, and I have to agree with that, it's the fruit of the poison tree. You can't make something legal that started off illegal. Can't do it. President acting the way he did, I wouldn't say was illegal, but I would say that he didn't have the power to do it. Not the way it was done. You're going to hear people screaming the next couple of weeks and all the way down the line, impeach, this is an impeachable offense. No, it's not an impeachable offense. He's carrying out the duties of the president, and even though what was deemed by the Supreme Court was that he did an overreach of his executive power, And that happens. It happens with every president where the administration goes down this road. Supreme Court goes, no, 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 you can't do that. You got to back it up. It happened to Biden. It happened to Obama. It happens to all the presidents. So you can't say, well, we should impeach him for that. No, no. The system worked the way the system was supposed to work. So the world is once again round. In this case, I think that he had gotten some, bad advice. Now, understanding that Trump does not like hearing anything that goes against what he wants to do. But there were other ways for him to do it without this being really so damaging. And when I say damaging, it distracted the real issues going on, and it made a lot of money for the federal government. And he did make some good deals that were beneficial to the United States. But there were other ways for him to do that and invoke his power under the emergency, Emergency Economic International Powers Act. So the IEEPA tariffs as illegal. All right. They could say that people can call it illegal. It wasn't within his power to do. Not like that. Not like that. I wouldn't say it was illegal, but it wasn't allowed. Tariffs are allowed, so the saying that it's illegal, I don't know if I go that far, but and no one is sure really how a reset really works, because it's never happened before. So everything going from this point on that happened since the tariffs began, it'd be easy to say, hey, they don't count. It goes back to what was originally agreed upon way back whenever. And you get to restart the clock. I'm not sure it's going to work that way in most cases. Now, the president, under Section 122, the Trade Act of 1974, that's the one I was talking about, that Nixon administration had done, would allow the authority to impose an across-the-board 10% global tariff. Allows tariffs up to 15% to address the balance of payments concerns and can be deployed almost immediately. But as with every one of these things, there are limitations and terms that must be applied. Those actions that the president takes under that Trade Act of 1974, they would expire after 150 days unless Congress votes to extend them. So for 5 months, he can do this. The statute only requires a presidential determination that such a deficit exists and does not mandate an investigative process, or it he doesn't even have to show why he did it, other than saying it's a, you know, it's way too much money to pay out or do or whatever, and I can impose this 15% tariff. It doesn't need to be interrogated, or really any formal investigation. But it does expire after 150 days without Congress saying, we'll give you another X amount of days. It could be 5 days, could be no days. It could be another 150 days. So that's where Congress then gets to say, this is what we're going to do. This is what we need to do. And in that 150 days, you can work out maybe with Congress all these tariffs and trade agreements really need to go through Congress. It's done that way. It's set that way. So that Congress always has a say. If it comes into this country, it affects all 50 states. So it makes sense that your House of Representatives have a major say on what happens that affects people in their states. That's the way this book works. And you can say, well, Trump threw that all, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they all do. And then they get reined in. And that's why you're allowed to challenge. You can go. And this was challenged pretty quickly. And, Trump, said, I want the power. I want to make sure, not even I want to make sure I could do this. It was other people who said, hey, can this guy do this? Because I don't see that. And I read it this way, and now I'm asking the Robes for an opinion. And their opinion matters. So what they really told Donald Trump was, you can set tariffs. No question about that. But only as it applies to the law. So you applied the wrong laws to support your actions, and that law does not tell you you can do that. And there are laws that tell the president how he can act in during certain circumstances. And I said that before. And, I said I like Trump. I like his attitude. And I said, after hearing all his proposals on January 20th, 2025, I said, he's got about an 80% chance on some of these. And these other ones that he's talking about, and mostly with trade. And the only one that kind of threw me and was the Trump being able to fire chairmen of different agencies. that those chairpersons were vetted by the Senate. And there are reasons you could fire someone, but you have to report that to the Senate. And when Trump went after the FTC and some other groups in the Department of Labor and then the Department of Education, yeah, there are circumstances inside the caveat of the language to give the president the power to go, you're fired. But it can't be because I don't like you. Or you aren't my political guy. So when the Supreme Court allowed him to do that, kind of looked and I'm like, well, all right, you might be able to touch some of the reasons with some of the people. But I wasn't completely convinced, not that it matters, that those actions would have been held, by the Supreme Court. That one surprised me because I would have said, no, here's the rules for firing these people, and they were made very high so that when someone came into office, they just can't rip that whole organization apart. So, but that's that's with that. So the Trade Act, Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, which authorizes the U.S. government to investigate unfair trade practices and import tariffs in response. He used the mechanism against China during his first term and launched a separate investigation into Brazil last year. Officials had discussed applying it to countries that lack a formal trade agreement with the United States, too, because the statute requires an investigation before duties can be imposed, it is a slower implementation process than other actions. And like sectorial tariffs, Section 232. There are also trade authorities that the president has already used, which he could use to bring back some tariffs. One such law is in Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which authorizes the president to impose tariffs or quotas on imports deemed to threaten national security, following an investigation and recommendation by the Secretary of Commerce. Because the statute does not define national security, it grants the executive branch broad discretion into its interpretation. Now, that's the administration saying, I could interpret it this way. The Supreme Court goes, well, you think you can interpret it this way, but this is what it really means. And it's going to be, since it's going to get challenged, it's going to be our interpretation, meaning the Supreme Court's. This will be another argument. Importantly, that this cannot completely replace Trump's emergency tariffs, since the tariffs are applied by sectors. And read up on that. And do not universally apply to all products coming into the United States. However, there is no cap on the tariff rate. So Section 232 has no upper limits. And I stated before that my feeling was Section 232 and Section 301 really should have been where the president had gone with this. And I felt that he really went off base, and had he stuck to what amounted to baby steps, probably could have gotten better deals. Because if you went to some countries that were not in our trade agreement, we just trade with them and whatever it is, and go, now you're 15%, and they go, whoa, well, it was nothing before. Yeah. But now it's 15% for everyone. So it's being evenly applied because it's globally. And then some countries could come back and go, hey, we've always done business with you. We like doing business with you. And, all right, maybe you weren't getting your cut of action, but 15%. And in some cases, there is no limit. And maybe, hey, listen, I'm not out to cripple you, but it's been unfair. We've been paying you import duties here to get our stuff into your country, and you get over here for nothing or next to nothing? No. You'll pay 15%, I'll pay 15%. Going to you, not the other way around, or where you then limit me to say, oh yeah, but you can't sell rice here. Or you can't sell tomatoes here. Oh, well, that's what you want. Now I can go, sky's the limit. That's the approach that I thought he should have taken, and used other agencies that just deal with that, than sitting there trying to do it himself. And I certainly can understand people being upset with Trump over the fact that you can't, this isn't a business. The United States doesn't run like a business, because it could run in the red, it could run in the black. Doesn't matter. It runs. Where business go, I can't continue, people will just not going to give me money anymore, lend me money, or I won't be able to repay it, and the business either has to sell itself, fix the problems, or go bankrupt. The government doesn't run that way. It just collects money, and if we need more, we get more. Or we just keep piling on the debt, and there's no one there to go, we're not going to lend you any more money. No, we're just not going to do it. So, by the trade deficits, then they're not, well, the trade deficits that we're facing now are due to a lot of market conditions. We don't make anything. We're a consumer nation. We were a producing nation, and most of that was manufacturing and food. But as the world got smarter, they were able to start doing a lot of this stuff on their own, and no longer needed the United States being there as, where they have to come hat in hand to you and you go, well, I'm going to cut the best deal possible for me. And yeah, you can have this, but, here's the price tag. Well, now they don't have to do that. You have China out there, you have Japan, you have Europe that can step in. We did not stay competitive because factories here, it was cheaper for them to pay labor and pass the cost on a bit than it would be to have a company manufacturing over here and then build a whole new company over here to do that manufacturing, robotically or on a much more efficient basis. Because now I'm paying for it over here, and now I'm paying for it over here, and it's doubled. And that comes off our capital, that comes off our revenue, and I got to explain this to shareholders who, might be in the program, now. I mean, in that company stock, with a portfolio, and they go, well, you know what, we don't like it, and we're going to pull our money out and move it into this other company. That takes away working capital. So companies always looked at that as, that's a lot to do. And all of a sudden you had, cars being made in Japan for $2,300 being sold over here for $4,000, while our cars here were made here. They weren't any better, in some cases worse, and then being sold for $8,000 or $6,000. And the consumer goes, I just need a car to get up to the station, go shopping. I'm not going cross country in this car. So, yeah, that $4,000 car, that's what I'm going to buy. And Detroit, didn't care about all the warning signs and people going, hey, ooh, look what they're doing over there. No one's going to buy those pieces of crap. Well, some of those cars were pieces of crap, but they got better, and they learned. And since they had an automated assembly line, it didn't take that long for them to adapt, where here we had people and you had to train them and you had to keep them. And that took time. And it cost money and they didn't want to do it. This is why these companies today are all scrambling. AI. AI is the biggest bullshit that's out there. It's not here yet, folks. And they go, well, this machine can do this, only because it's programmed that way. Only because it's programmed that way. And, well, the robotic, they operate on people robotic, only because they're programmed to do it. They have a set parameter to look at. If this is this, if this is that, it's that there, it's that there. They might be more efficient in looking at the whole picture than a doctor or a surgeon looking in there and, all right, and let me go over here. And the textbook says that in 20% of the cases, when you see this over here, you might want to look over there for something. And the surgeon's in there and he's looking, yeah, all right, seems to be okay. Where electronics could be looking and flagging all that, but that's not AI. That's not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence would be, it starts off with very basic functions and it watches things and it learns and then it applies that logic and what it learned towards a practical end. So you could have something learn watching, you know, but it's going to only remember what it was looking at. It won't remember what a beautiful day it was. Or that, hey, let me think outside the box here a little bit. It's not going to do that. It might look at something and go, yeah, the hand turns like this, and that's hard to do all the time, and it's inefficient because if the hand could turn like this and like that, and it's not restricted by muscles and bones, and it's just can do anything and spin around and do things, it becomes more efficient. But it didn't learn that. Someone has to program that. And if that program doesn't have eyes to look and see what's going on and go, yeah, I like looking at the flowers. And, that took 8 weeks to go from here to there. What does it apply? How does it apply? And I might look at that and go, I'm really not interested in how flowers grow. But I am very interested in how an airplane engine works. And, the thrust vector over here, if we change this a little bit, I did the mathematics and it would work. It might be a little bit more efficient. But if it never got exposed to it, how would it know it? The idea of AI being all powerful, no. Because it will only learn what we allow it to see. And then you have to say, what is it that you want to see? I've showed you all this. What would you like to look at again? Is it able to say, I'm interested in this? Or would it just put it all in there and go, well, when I see something turn like that, I got all these things that turn and let me go in there, where we look at stuff and go, yeah, I need a Phillips screwdriver. The idea of AI, that's what I'm just saying, got off the subject, but you got me going on AI. And all these companies that failed is why we have problems with our trade agreements. And that was Republicans and Democrats. I'm not going to blame the Democrats. I'm not going to blame the Republicans. That was all of them in cahoots, getting their little piece of the action in their time frame because they knew one day I won't be sitting here. But wherever I want to be sitting, I want to make sure it's either where I want it to be, nice, warm, with a drink in my hand and a new wife, than, sitting in an igloo somewhere, figuring out where am I going to eat next and how am I going to stay warm. So we don't build anything. We don't allow businesses to expand. And when businesses do expand, then they're, well, oh, it's a Google or it's It's Tesla. And look at these horrible individuals. And you have people that are preventing technology. People need to work. That's how we do things. That's how our brains work. And I think you're going to have a lot of problems if you just say, you don't have to work anymore. Here's X amount of food, here's X amount of this, and what do? Surf the internet? Start a podcast? Bob in New York. What do? Take drugs? Maybe that's why the governments are all allowing their people to take drugs. Making drugs easier to get. Keeps the masses happy. Make it cheap, make it available. I don't know. I look at, drugs as being a means of control. If I have you addicted to drugs, you'll just about do anything to get those drugs. You won't care. And that's what happens. It's about power. But what has happened with our industries was that other countries developed their industries. Now, China, you can't even walk around in their cities. It's so polluted. India, so polluted. But where you have a government that says, yeah, we'll worry about that later. But right now, it costs in the United States to make that product $25, and we can make it here for $2 and sell it for $18 to the Americans, who then can sell it to their people at $25, and they don't have to do anything. Those companies that are distributing that stuff, those products, and part of the trade agreements for China where you had to give up your intellectual rights if you're going to have them build it. And these companies sold everyone out because they got paid a lot of money. And they knew, well, eventually they'll figure out how to make a TV. Eventually they'll do it. So might as well not make the money now while we can and look towards other avenues. We don't allow a lot of research that goes on in this country. But it's allowed to go on in India, and it's allowed to go on in China and in Russia. It's almost limitless. And that's why our government was funding programs in China. Because we couldn't do it here. But we could do it there and reap the benefits. Maybe. To get back to the president. The president still has a fistful of laws that he can use. Will this affect the elections? Not so much. I think this was a distraction away for the Democrats now, a distraction away from Epstein, because Epstein wasn't providing them with anything other than tabloid news. And the fraud that's been going on out there, you hear anything about the fraud? ICE is now on page 6. So everyone likes a distraction. When you're the one being looked at and you go, now they're looking at something else, at least, then something else will come along and, I'll still be out there, but I won't be looked at. And the Democrats could use this as a talking point. The trade that, boom, boom, boom. So the GOP is going to turn it all around on fraud. On fraud. Trump is trying to make the best deal for America in the long run, but in the short run, the Democrats were robbing us of billions of dollars, maybe trillions. Now, were the Republicans out there making money from it? You bet they were. Just look for the ones that are screaming the most about, we don't need to look in over here. We don't, we're cleaning we started to clean our house out a while ago of problems. You look at those red states. But believe me, the trade thing is going to be the fraud. The GOP should just keep pounding away on the Democrats, the blue states, on fraud. Go after California. You want a slightly flipping state? Go to Maine. Look at the fraud that's going on over there. Look at the fraud that's going on in Virginia. Can't speak for Florida and Texas, but DeSantis has pretty good control over that. And the governor of Texas seems to be, Abbott seems to be pretty well situated. Will you find fraud in those states? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's always someone out there gaming the system. So, I don't see this as being that big of a political, the tariffs being that big of a political hot potato. Because Trump had said in the beginning, this is not anything that he said he wasn't going to do. And the only thing that Trump might find himself on a little ledge is how he did it, and he didn't take the advice of people around him. But that's Trump. That's Trump. All right, this has been going on for almost 50 minutes. I want this to end. I'm going to get this out there in about, it's Saturday. It's 4:47 p.m. I'll have this out the door by 6 o'clock and edit. It's going to be a light edit, so don't look for anything here much. Give to a charity if you can do it and you're comfortable with it. If not, please think about giving to a food bank. Not only food, but they could always use monetary help. Say a prayer. Prayer does work no matter what a Democrat might tell you. And with that, I'm going to do a good night. I do not see myself doing a show tomorrow, even though this week has been really not a very productive week for me. And probably the next couple of weeks won't be either, but we're going to try. We're going to try. And with that, I'm going to say thank you. Good night. Be safe. Hug people next to you. And be good. And we all say prayers as I fade to black.